There we go. Well, back to the Pineapple Express. How do I see the future? And what claims should I have that any of my projections have any serious value? I cannot claim, for instance, the Bible. I cannot claim, but lots of my friends can. Well, not lots, but a few, and they're determined. So that makes a difference, you know. And that is so good. Father, Son. I think this should start to be one of those eating channels where we eat fruit and demonstrate our obvious delight in that experience. I don't know the history of pineapples, but I know they're heavily cultivated everywhere now. And I get the feeling, I could be wrong, that they're very organic. I certainly hope so. But that's kind of a silly, non-philosophical statement, because everything is organic. Everything has a center of gravity. Many things have a center of magnetism. And mother and father, son, and mother standing up for her children. I've been at odds these many years. Father, son has always seen the necessity in a certain way for cycles, for turnover, for extinction. Some of the principles surrounding the Hindu gods, the attributes of the divine and so on, are clearly metaphors for adventures of the human kind that are a part of simply being on this planet. And a part of that has to do with the fact that we're an evolutionary species, and that sometimes, for no good reason, we lose our way. We spin out, if you will. And the last, I would say, 4,000 to 5,000 years, roughly speaking, is the length of what the pundits, certainly Sri Yukteswar, considered to be one yuga, one age, and it's probably closer to 12 times 52, whatever that might be. But anyway, the math gets tricky, and I'm not a mathematician. But I do understand that the book he wrote, I think it was called Spiritual Science, Sri Yukteswar. I think you can get it in any good spiritual books, like Banyan. You can get it there, I'm sure. I think that's where I got my copy. I haven't seen one in years, but they're probably still out there. And he wasn't authoritarian about it. He just raised the question, just as Velikovsky, for all his medical doctorate from Edinburgh University, which to me gives a strange background to a man like that, who then brought catastrophe into the minds of the people, in a manner of speaking. I suppose it was inevitable. It came when we began to see the planet Earth from space for the first time, and began to feel the natural isolation that Buddha would have been able to direct us to when he said life is conditioned and unfree. Well, we are at the bottom of a gravity sink in one atmosphere, one surface chemistry, and the only thing that we can escape with, I suppose, are our photons of conscious awareness. If you have to acknowledge you have one. Of course, if you do, then you have to take on the possibility that life might be eternal, and maybe what you have been doing here may have some ultimate justice found for it. So I highly recommend people, drop out of law enforcement. Peacekeeping, that's one thing. Law enforcement is another. Whose law are you enforcing? There are lots of good men, I do believe, who make a distinction between peacekeeping and law enforcement. And I would call upon the police forces around the world to begin to look at what they are enforcing. And if it is not common sense, if it is not reason, if it's just the will of this or that dictatorship, then I think we should look behind that dictatorship and say, who's the psychopath? And once that has been established, then that gentle person, hopefully, can be restrained from exercising the power that they managed to get in their hot little hands. Or should I say their cold little hands, because it's pretty evident that the well-being of individuals, conceivably outside their family. I mean, you can't say that they're all quite as extreme as others, but certainly there's not much sense of empathy or not much sense of a common bond. And yet these are the people who've finagled their way through tricks which, been evident to me for 50 years and were evident to people long before that who told me that when I came here. You don't have to be a British intelligence agent to read Canadian history, and it's pretty foul. And especially the history that was never written about the behavior of men who were not in the war, who remained away from the war and took every advantage of the situation. And there's a very sad history there. Not that we need to dig into it, because many of those people are now passing from the scene. But as some years ago, I was speaking to a Chinese philosopher when I was very positive about Mao's efforts. Certainly I hadn't taken much exception to anything he had to say at that time. What he was doing, of course, I was not fully informed about. But anyway, philosophically, I said this to this Chinese gentleman one day, and they were flying essentially the Taiwanese nationalist flag. In those days, they were much more aggressively disposed towards one another, and they hadn't come under the general umbrella of Sun Yat-sen, who enabled, real peace to arrive and a real sense of equality to return. And this was achieved in a very, very remarkable way by the Chinese, and their toleration and their strength of character, and the fact that, of course, the vast majority of them, are fully informed to something approaching a classical education, which regretfully we don't teach as broadly as we should.